Well, what's up, you guys? Hey, another week, another incredible week as we get into the Chaz Way podcast. I'm joined by an incredible guest again. As always, somebody amazing joins us because, it's crazy. I feel like I preface this each week by saying we're connected with incredible people, and that's why networking is amazing. I actually found this guy through Bradley and Bradley's podcast months and months ago. Actually, I was re-listening yesterday to Brad's podcast with Brian, and today it's Brian Bogert, and you can find him, by the way, online at brianbogert.com, and we'll get into that later as I introduce him. But I guess it was in January of 2022 that Brian was on the Bradley podcast, and the reason that I have asked him to be on this show is because the dude is so incredibly authentic. And I'm not going to get into his story because I want him to share it with you guys. But what I want you to do is be prepared for real, be prepared for raw, and also be prepared for this, my friends. You guys are going to be in for a treat because I want you to know that, and I'm saying this to you, Brian, as well as the listeners, this is a brilliant speaker. And I mean brilliant. Like, the way that you communicate is incredible. So without further ado, I just want you to introduce yourself, Brian, and we'll start really generic by saying, tell us who you are and where you're from.
Chaz, I think that it might be official. You might be one of my hype men now at this point. I might have to get you a giant clock and start calling you Flava Flav so you can promote me all over the world. Because, bro, you just poured so much love into me, and I'm so grateful for that. The one thing I want to say, because I actually thought that you'd listen to both podcasts. I've been on Bradley's show twice. And so you mentioned me in January. And if you saw the January episode, you'll love the one from July last year. So, Chaz, I want to make sure that if you haven't seen that one, that you go back and do that. Now, here's the thing, who I am. I appreciate that you asked that question because it's one of the first questions I ask people. And most people, 99% of people, when you ask who they are, they answer with what they do. So I'm going to try to break that mold and really live by example to give everybody some context, because I believe that centering on the who is one of the most powerful things we can do. I'm a husband and father first. It is the only thing binary in my world, meaning all of what we're trying to do to have an impact on over 1 billion lives as quickly as possible by reducing the level of suffering on this planet will not exist. And I will walk away from it in a heartbeat if my wife and my kids are not good. Period. End of story. Now, that's who I am first. That's my most important role. But I am someone who's deeply fascinated by the human experience. I've been studying human behavior for a very, very long time because who I am is someone who likes to absorb and receive information and actually watch other people and witness their own glory come to fruition. I get deeply intellectually intrigued. And so I've always said that I'm only as good as my questions. And so in so many situations, that's one of the ways that I've learned how to actually grow. I'm somebody who recognizes that I can learn from anybody in any situation. And we were talking about this before we hit the record. And it's, in fact, one of the things I talk about with my story is that, yes, I've got a very unique story. We might get into it today. We might not. But the reality of it is we all have unique stories. And so we have the ability to tap into the collective wisdom of other people's stories and lessons to shorten our own curve to learning. And so that's a little about who I am, but I'm also somebody who likes to move. I'm physically active. I am not always greatest when I'm at rest, though rest and recovery are a big part of my life now. And I'm also somebody who really has figured out the importance of taking ourselves on an internal journey, starting from the inside out.
Wow.
And allowing ourselves to connect deeply with who we are and using the connection and relationship with ourselves to permeate into every connection and relationship in our businesses and lives. Because if we know who we are, then all the what's in our world are a manifestation of who we are, not the other way around. And I only know that because I chased the what's of the world for so long and I lost who I was as a result of it. Now I'm who I am, and all the what's come to me as an inconsistent and congruent way based on who I am, not the other way around. So I know that was probably not the answer you were looking for right out of the gate, but that's probably the best example of who I am, not what I do.
I think it's really, first of all, thank you for that. And I want to dive just for a second to respect the listener. It's very possible that somebody could overlook what you just said there at the end. And you talked about chasing the what's and not, and I don't want to misquote you. So just repeat that and then dive in a little bit about what you meant by that. When you spent all those years chasing the what's, and then you really basically dove in and kind of figured out the who. And basically, I think what you mean is who you really are. Will you just talk a little bit deeper about that for a second? Because I think that's important to not miss.
Yeah, thank you. So I, as so many of us, was conditioned to chase all the what's of the world. what house, what car, what amount of money, what amount of success, what job, what place I need to live in, what types of people I need to be around, all the what's. And the reality of it is that I was so focused on the what, using this beautiful gift called our mind and our brain to hone in on mindset and mental toughness, which, by the way, at this point, I now believe is only a part of the equation. But it used to be my greatest factor in my equation of chasing all those things. So I got all the what's I wanted. Literally, I had so many things in my life: house, car, money, all these things outlined in my life. They were the what's that I was chasing. And I had them all by the time I was 27. But what it cost me was who I am. And I realized as I woke up one day, after I was running in circles with people making multiple 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures in some cases, realizing that I'd lost who I was and I was a little bit miserable. And as I looked around the room, it became very, very apparent that I was not the only one. There were many of us that were operating from what most people on the outside would have said is the epitome of success. We had everything. Our lives looked great, but so many of us were miserable on the inside. And so that was the process about a decade ago that I started to actually unpack the layers of what the world has put on me, get back to the core of who I am, which also involved a great deal of healing and pain that has existed in my life. But the closer and closer I've gotten to who I am, not only am I more free, but I'm filled with more joy. I have definitely more fulfillment. And it is just interesting because I get to move faster through life with less effort. So more things come to me and through me than ever before because I've eliminated the majority of the resistance and energy drain in my world. And I'm constantly reconciling that daily.
And you started that when you just because I want to tie a bow on this piece real quick. So you discovered that when you discovered
about 10 years ago, I was about 20
to start working through that 10.
Yep.
27 years old. Is that right?
Yep.
Is that what you said? Okay. And then, so 10 years ago, you started to discover that, and you've taken 10 years of your life to work through it. Now, I don't know that you said this yet, but you would probably agree that you're not there yet, right? It's a daily work.
There is no final destination, brother.
Sure.
There's only constant evolution of self. So the day I wake up and have it all figured out might be the last day I live on this planet.
Absolutely. Right. And so just as a reminder, right, that the reality is we are forever growing. We're forever evolving. We're forever working through our stuff, through our junk, through our life, through the messiness. I often say that, if we're just remembering that it's okay to give ourselves some grace, as long as we take a moment to give the grace and go, oh, okay. I think it's one thing to go, oh, screwed up, and then put it by the wayside, but it's effective and positive if you take it and go, oh, you know what? I could have done this different, or what could I readjust? How could I align slightly different and then move forward? And it sounds to me like you're doing that every day. Once you identified it, and then probably you're starting to peel back layers every day. And we'll talk about that because I think that some of the coaching that you do as well is helping people start to peel layers back and identify. We'll get to that. But before we get to that, let's go back, because here's what's crazy is in 5 minutes that we've talked, we figured out who you are. You're a father, you're a husband, and that is the absolute biggest priority. It's the first thing you talked about. And I love that. I love that you make that your priority. I know that about you. And I love that about you. I think that's incredible. What people haven't heard yet, and what I could say is that without even hearing where I'm going to go next, people will know that you're confident, you're strong, you love your family, you're in tune with who you are, you're working every day to evolve who you are. What they don't know is that at 7 years old, as a young 7-year-old, just living life, being a kid, your life was turned completely upside down. And you even said in the beginning of this, so we may not talk about that. And that's because you're humble and you've chosen not to live in not only your past, but not to live in your struggles. But I'm going to take it there for a minute because I want to set the scene to a place where, because all of us have struggles, we talked about this earlier, even off the air, that we all have a story. And I would be willing to bet that I think somebody would be lying, Brian, if they said that their life has been perfect, right? In fact, even Bradley says, my life hasn't been that bad. It was, and he said it on your podcast episode where he's like, I've just been kind of lucky, but it doesn't mean he wasn't dealt some rough cards. He's had some stuff. He's just chose to look at it from a really, really nice place. That's right. Great perspective. So everybody's got some trauma, some stuff. Yours was very no different than anybody's, but different in the same manner. And so before I butcher the way I'm going to try and deliver that, let's just talk about it. 7 years old, life seems normal, I assume. And what happens?
We went to our local Walmart, my mom, my brother, and I, to get a 1-inch paintbrush to finish up a trim job on painting in a new house that we had just moved into, or we're moving into. And as I was standing next to my mom's car as we were headed home, waiting for her to unlock the doors. See, this was back in the days before there was key fobs, brother. So I had to wait for her to literally reach into her purse, pull the keys out, stick it in the door, turn the key so we could go on with our way. I'm standing there, and in that little bit of time that today we also take for granted because we can just push a key from 25 feet away and the door's unlocked, right? Truly,
yeah, I don't even wait.
That's all what happened. I was just waiting there. They were a few feet behind me. There was a truck that pulled up in front of the store right when this took place, and the driver and middle passenger got out. Passenger all the way to the right felt the truck moving backwards. So Chaz, he did what any one of us would do, and he scooted over, put his foot on the brake. Now I had this like vision in my head that like for years that he would just scoot over nice and calm and put his foot on the brake and everything was going to be okay. But what I realized not that long ago is, no, that is not what I would do if I was in the passenger seat. If I was in the passenger seat and I felt the truck moving backwards, I would rush over as quickly as possible. I'd raise my knee as high as I could and I'd slam it on that gas or on that brake pedal to really stop the truck. But guess what? He missed the brake pedal and he hit the gas pedal. Combination of shock and force threw him up on the steering wheel, up on the dashboard, catapulting 40 miles an hour across the parking lot right at us with no time to react. So we were in an M spot. He went up and over the median, went up over the tree in the median, hit our car, knocked me over, ran over me diagonally, tearing my spleen, leaving a tire track scar on my stomach, and continuing on to completely sever my left arm from my body.
Wow.
So 6:10 p.m., 115-degree day, August 10th, 1992. My mom and brother watched the whole thing happen. And they look up and they now see me laying on the pavement and they see my arm 10 feet away. Fortunately for me and my guardian angel, and I always have to comment on this beautiful woman every time I tell my story, because there was a guardian angel, a nurse who walked out of the store right when this took place, and she saw the literal life and limb scenario in front of her. And so I'm forever indebted to her for choosing to move into action versus going on with her day. Because she came over and she immediately stopped the bleeding on the main wound and she saved my life. And then she instructed some innocent bystanders to run inside, grab a cooler, fill it with ice, and get my detached limb on ice within minutes to give me a fighting chance of having a reattached arm. Had she not done one or both of those things, Chaz, I either wouldn't be here with you today or I'd be here with you today with a cleaned up stump. That's just the reality.
Wow. Well, chills for sure. And so many questions. And I don't want to like over put a whole lot of energy into that other than the moving forward part, because that's where success starts to happen. And what I do want to acknowledge for a second is that you've also chosen to acknowledge a guardian angel. And let's just take a second to acknowledge, I'm not being like cliche or cheesy when I say that, but you acknowledged her. And I also want to acknowledge the fact that there was somebody there, because the truth is, in any situation and circumstance in life, there can be somebody around who chooses to jump into action. That's right. Whether it's somebody with a flat tire, whether it's somebody that breaks into a house, whether it's somebody that needs a little bit of gas. Believe it or not, I ran out of gas about a month and a half ago. I'm a 45-year-old man. My son's 15. We're driving down the road. I'm like, Braxton, we're going to run out of gas. And he's like, why did you not fill up? And I'm like, because I thought I was planning it well to the next gas station. And this guy, I said, I could see the gas station sign, and it's about a mile and a half. You could see the sign, but just because you could see it doesn't mean it's an easy walk, So it's embarrassingly walking to that. I mean, it's not what we wanted to do that afternoon, but we walked, long story short, we're walking to the gas station and this guy pulls off and gives us a ride to the gas station. And not only, and then I'm even grateful. I'm like, he's giving us a ride. I'll buy a well overpriced half gallon of, gas can and walk back. And then the guy circled around and he said, man, let me just give you a ride back. Like he was going the other way, but he gave us a ride back. And it seems so simple, but like the guy didn't have to do that. Now, in your head, you're shaking your head like, well, duh, I would do that. And I even said that I would do that for somebody most of the time, but not everybody would. And so whoever this lady is, she chose to do that. And even though it sounds so simple, not everybody would. And so what was that like? Well, I guess what I really want to know is, did you stay in touch with her? Were you able to do you have a relationship with this person?
You know what? I've actually been on a mission for the last year to find her. I've never met her. There was some very, very simplistic communication that took place right after the accident. And then I've been trying to find her because at this point, knowing everything that we're doing in the world, I really just want to say thank you.
Yeah.
I've never had the chance to say thank you. And the thank you is far bigger than even just for me. It's recognizing that I wouldn't be able to live the life that I do to create the level of impact that we are if it wasn't for her. And so I want her to understand the ripple effect of her choice, because she has put me into a position to be able to be happy, healthy, and living a productive life because of the choice she made. And so I hope at some point that I get a chance to find her, thank her, and give her a hug, because to your point exactly, it would have been just as easy for her to turn her head and go the other way. And I might not actually be here with you today as a result of that.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that she did that, and I'm glad that you are here. I think you pour so much into the world, and I think people need to know about it for sure. Just as we exit out of the story of what happened at 7, what happened next? I'm sure you get rushed to the hospital. What happens to where you are today, where you do have a working limb? You are an able-bodied human. You are able to be an impact in this world. What took place to make that happen?
Yeah, so a whole lot. Funny enough, that what happened immediately after the accident is the first ambulance that got called got into a car accident. And I had to share that part because, it was just one of those things you and I were talking earlier. It's like, yeah, man, everything happens for a reason. I still don't know what the reason for that was, but it got into a car accident. So I ended up rushing. At the time, there was also only 3 surgeons in Arizona that were capable of performing such a surgery. And one of them was out of town. One of them had just worked a 12-hour day and said, I can't do the surgery. And another one, the last one, had just worked a 12-hour day, but he said, this is a 7-year-old boy. I got to give him a fighting chance. And so after we got through all of the hospital rights and everything, he began the reconstruction of my arm, which would take place over 24 more surgeries, because at that moment, he didn't know whether or not everything would take place, if it would all be successful. So really the next 5 years were filled with a lot of physical and occupational therapy and 24 surgeries over the course of that period of time, doing reconstruction, moving nerves and muscles and everything around to give me the arm that I have today that I can now function with. But I will tell you that it was that period of time, and largely the ICU, that taught me one of my core lessons. Actually, that 5 years really gave me 2 of my life lessons. One of them was I learned very early not to get stuck by what has happened to me, but instead get moved by what I can do with it. And this came from the idea that I felt sorry for myself right out of the gate. I mean, I remember literally at 7, after I woke up out of my fog, thinking that this was a dream, sitting in my bed, asking myself the question, well, what does this mean for my future? And why me? And what's happening? And what am I going to do? Am I going to ever be able to use my arm again? At 7 years old, I was having those thoughts. And then the families in the ICU started coming up to us saying, we're so sorry, Brian. We're so sorry for what happened to you. We're so sorry. What can we do to help? And then I find out that their kid's laying in the hospital bed next to me in the ICU, not knowing if they're going to live another 30 days because of the terminal illness that they have. Perspective hit me right in the face. Wow. And I often say that pain and perspective point us at what's important if we're choosing to listen. But it was one of those moments that I really was hit hard because, although I didn't know if I'd ever have successful use of my arm again, I knew I'd be alive because the immediate threat to my life was over.
Yeah.
While these kids were battling this multiple times. And so over the course of the next decade, I lost a number of them to their fights and their own battles. And that's something I think about every single day. The second lesson that I really extracted from that period of time didn't come right away, but it happened really as a result of my parents. You see, I was in a fog. I truly was. I was deep in a fog because although I was the one having the surgeries and going through all of the procedures and doing all the therapy, I was being guided through the process. But my parents were not. They were intimately aware of the unceasing medical treatments and years of physical therapy. And the idea of seeing their son grow up without the use of his left arm was a source of great potential suffering for them. So they willed themselves day in and day out to do what was necessary, to do what was tough, to embrace the pains required to ultimately strengthen and heal me. And so that's where this idea and this thought process and this life lesson came from. Whether it was intentional or not, what they did was they ingrained in me this philosophy and way of living, which was to embrace pain, to avoid suffering. And I believe that when we do this correctly, that's also where we gain freedom. And so these were really the 2 foundational life lessons that I've used to apply periods of growth multiple times over the course of the last 30 years, but ones that we've really integrated into the movement of how we actually interact and work with people, because they're foundational concepts. Because here's what I know: moved people move people. So if we can teach more people to get moved by the things that have happened to them in their lives versus get stuck by them, then they're going to go out into the world and move more people. And if we can recognize that it's the pains that we are avoiding that are developing the suffering that we experience in life, then we can start to really take back influence and control over our destinies and start to recognize in every category of our lives how do we actually avoid the long-term suffering, and how do we put ourselves in the best position to succeed based on who we are?
Oh, that's so good. So powerful. All I can, as you're talking about the hospital room and then the next 5 years and all of the fog, all I can think about is just what a massive, massive blessing that, because not every kid would handle it the same. And it would not be fair for me to judge what each kid's perspective would be.
Agreed. Completely. Yeah.
But the fact, and I hope that you guys hear and just take a second, if you're not driving, to just listen to what I'm about to say. The fact that you, Brian, were able to take the situation over that few years of really not knowing, and we'll call it the fog that you described, and found the ways to channel that into different areas. And then even the two massive, massive life-changing lessons that you learned through that. We're talking 7 years old. And even if you talk about the next 5 years, up to 12. So 7 to 12 over those 5 years of surgeries. The fact that even by 12, at 12 years old, we are not developed mentally, typically, to be in a mature enough space to go, wow, I've had some nuggets of life lesson that I'm going to be able to redirect my life path, or how I can focus my and shift to the reality that my life is still here. Even if I have a challenge with a limb, my life is still here. These others aren't. These kids maybe aren't here, or maybe their story is written way differently now. So, I mean, yes, credit to you, but even deeper credit to the alignment of how amazing that the tragedy happened to you, and that you were able to channel it the way you did. Do you think that's a tribute to your parents at all? I mean, you talked about what they went through, but do you think you had some layers of foundation before this incident that maybe gave you that ability to have that depth?
The answer is absolutely yes.
Wow.
Now, I would tell you that it's been a very healthy blend of who I naturally was even before my accident, and how I viewed the world and the way that I navigated things. But it would be absolutely ignorant, naive, and not viewing the full picture if a large amount of credit didn't go to my family, my parents, and my brother for the way that they helped me navigate this. Because the reality of it is that 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, I was incapable of doing the healing that was necessary and putting myself in the position to do those things without them. I just wasn't. And I know this, and I won't go too far down this path, but I know this because I re-broke my arm when I was 20, compound fracture, almost lost it again. It was hanging by my side for 10 months. And I will tell you that in that period, I had very stark perspective at the difference of navigating this journey alone as an adult versus together when I was a kid. And so I have a whole level of much deeper appreciation for them after having gone through that as an adult again, because it allowed me to relive a lot of the experience that I did at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old with an arm that was basically incapable of being able to be used at all for 10 months. I had to relearn how to do everything again. And I, this time, didn't have the support and the guidance that I once did.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect example of now here you are as an adult. That's a great full circle example. That's wild. Well, I mean, obviously massive credit to them as well. So let's fast forward a little bit. So, you talked about at 20, you have an arm break. I know just from previously hearing your interviews that at 21, you go to college, or maybe you graduated college at 21, but I know you went to college. Okay, cool. So let's get right into that, because I do want to talk about some of your business stuff, and then really what some of your mission, your life mission, some of the nitty gritty of your heart is. But let's talk about college. When did you go to college? Why did you go to college? And then what did you study?
Yeah, I went to college pretty much right when I was 18. So I went right after high school. I went 18 to 21. So 4 years, I did the traditional path. I got a Bachelor of Science in Business and a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology. I went to a small liberal arts private school in Southern California because I always wanted to leave Arizona and go spread my wings, for lack of a better term. I wanted the opportunity to separate from my family. And that's not to say that I'm not unbelievably grateful, but I wanted to show myself that I could do life myself. Not with the intent to be alone, because I don't want to do anything alone at this point in my life anymore. But I just had to prove to myself that I'd be capable of taking care of myself. And so I had a really incredible experience in college. It really put me into a great place. But it was also that same period of time that I started to extract some of these deeper lessons, because it was my junior year that I rebroke my arm. And that prior period of my life had been so focused on mindset and mental toughness. You know, when I felt the need to protect myself right after, from being so misunderstood after my injury, and so many people layering on top of me what they thought I'd be capable of if it was them in my situation, that I built this narrative that was like, I'm strong, I'm tough, I'm capable, I can do anything myself. And all of a sudden at 20, I am alone, I am living the life that I desired. And all of a sudden, nobody was there when I wasn't able to function at the level that I needed. And it was the first time in my life that I started to realize the power of our narratives, because the world bought into mine.
Wow.
They absolutely bought into mine, because everybody around me was like, well, Brian's tough, Brian's strong, Brian's capable, he can do anything himself. And if he needs help, he'll ask for it. But what they were missing in that period of time is that although that was true, I didn't have the courage at that time in my life to be vulnerable enough to actually ask for help. So I navigated largely 10 months with a couple of people to help me on that journey, but really recognizing the lack of human connection that I'd established in that prior period. And so as I was graduating college and leaning into the first part of my professional career, which was, I spent 15 years in risk management, employee benefits consulting. That was one of the periods that I started to really recognize that, look, mindset alone is not going to get me there. I really need people, right? So though I went out to be alone and establish myself on my own, I also started to really pay attention to the fact that I need to pay attention to human connection. And so that's where I really focused a lot of my energies over the next probably 10 to 13 years, is on the concepts of vulnerability and authenticity, which I believe are the glue that binds human connection. And so I really got deep into understanding these concepts and how do I use them to better connect with others.
Interesting. So I will just shift right into, where did that become your passion then? Because let's talk about your degree, because I think you have a degree in psychology, right?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. And so did your passion come from the learning part of that? And, over this, I mean, you talked about your, where you went into business, but I mean, I know there was a part where that truly has become your passion, and is into this day, I believe, I don't want to speak for you, but I believe that is absolutely your passion today.
People are my passion. Yeah.
The heartbeat.
There's no doubt about it. What's interesting is, nobody's ever asked me that question, Chaz. I really appreciate that question for a couple of reasons. What I didn't realize until far later in life is how much that period that I was focused on mindset and mental toughness actually was also conditioning my natural emotional intelligence. Because what I was really trying to do was to direct situations so that the attention wasn't on me. Which meant that I had to read rooms, read people, and really start to understand like these dynamics and variables. And simultaneously, I wasn't really using it effectively, because what was happening was I was still protecting myself through my own mindset. So I wasn't connecting. But what I was doing was honing my ability to read and see, which I would tell you is something that I've always had an ability to do. It got very honed and conditioned in this period of time. And so that idea of vulnerability and authenticity is what started to really breed this concept of reconnecting with myself and reconnecting with other people, because it is my passion. Now, here's the catch though. Where it led me to doing what I'm doing today in its full right actually wasn't through that period of human connection. It was through this understanding of the fact that when I shut off physical pain because the demands exceeded my ability to cope, I also shut off emotional pain, spiritual pain, mental pain. I shut off pain in my entire life. Physical pain was how I identified it, but I never really understood it. So I'm 30, laying on the couch with my daughter. Maybe I was 31 at the time. I always forget the exact age, but she was little, and she wrapped her arm around my neck after we'd been playing, and she kisses me on the cheek and she says, "Daddy, I love you." And I just melted into tears. And it was that moment that I realized that if I'm experiencing joy in this way to the point that it brought me to tears, and I've never experienced joy in this way before, what other emotions on that spectrum of emotion have I not actually experienced in full right? And so then it went into this path of really starting to, like, again, shed some of those layers that the world had placed on me. And what I started to pay attention to was how actively, but unconsciously, I was suppressing all feelings. And so I would just allow myself to sit in those moments and allow the emotion to actually bubble up enough that I could feel it and understand it. And that's actually what completed a big portion of my thought process, is that human connection without emotion isn't really human connection. So I had mastered vulnerability and authenticity from a strategic and tactical perspective, getting other people to bring their walls down. but I still wasn't living as authentically as I could myself because I lacked the emotional component.
Okay.
And so that piece is probably what really, that emotional understanding and recognizing that it's not just about mental toughness, that those that reach the highest level of performance are those that understand whether they're hardwired intellectually or emotionally first, and learn to listen to and balance and regulate between their intellectual and emotional narratives, because both lie to us and both tell us the truth. It was that piece that really started to help me understand, okay, I think we can have a big impact in this world because the world has taught us not only not how to think, but they've told us not to feel. And so if I can bring this back into the forefront and allow people to connect with what we are organically and naturally most connected to, which is ourselves, our emotions, our energies, then that is one of the ways that we can start to free people through themselves versus systems that we create in society.
It's a beautiful thing, man. That's a beautiful thing. Are both your parents still around?
They are, and they're still married.
That's awesome. It's incredible. Yeah. Do you have a good relationship with both of them?
I do. I think, as with all relationships, they always go through ebbs and flows. And, there are periods of time where I've desired to be better and more connected. But, those are relationships, just like I said, family first, that I am continually investing in to make sure that we're all getting the most out of it.
That's awesome. All right. So I thank you for the fact that you were so in depth with that is really and we'll talk more about this, but that's you're like speaking my language. This is it's not only something that I'm passionate about, what you just spoke on, but it's something that I battle every single day of my life. And I know from your interview with Brad, you talked about like, well, I'm not actually a crier, and I'm like, I am a crier.
Good. I wish I was.
It was so a whole time I'm listening to you and Brad's like, well, I was on this one stage, and Brad's like so masculine, but he's not. Like, I don't know Brad, but like there's this, I can see right through Brad. Like, I don't know him, but I will one day know him. But I'm like, the dude is, and I think that's why I like him, because I'm like, it's so funny. I can see
he has a good heart. He has a really good heart.
Oh,
he really does. Yeah. And I 1,000% agree with everything you just said. I see him and read him very well, and he's got a pure heart. And that's why that's why I continue to spend time with him.
Yeah. I feel it in him. And when he was even talking about it, he's like, well, after our first time we met, and then I was on this stage and I got a little emotional. And this time I just, instead of cracking a joke, you know exactly what I'm talking about, that story. Yeah. And then he's like, well, I just let a little bit of emotion out. And then you're like, well, yeah. And people connect with that. And I'm like, and that's me, man. That's me. And it's tough, and I'm not going to put I don't want to go there really, but I do want to thank you for that. I want to thank you that you are, that it's just a language that is important to me. I'm an only child raised by a single mom. I'm an emotional guy. I didn't have a dad, never had a father figure in my life. Still haven't, still don't, still trying to figure out why I care, why I didn't care as a young person, but that as an adult, it's now I struggle every day with it. Why? I don't know why, but part of that comes from like this kind of wanting to connect with people differently, and like my heart is people. And then is that me? Like, I didn't mean to go down this rabbit trail, but like part of it is like, am I stretching? Am I like seeking that connection with something that is a void I'm trying to fill, And so the language, what you're talking about right now, is really it's just something that is, it's I don't want to say it's a passion of mine, but it's on, I deal with it every day. So I appreciate that you speak on it. So turning that into the next thing, and that is that you now coach on this. And I say now, I know that's not a new thing. You've been doing it for several years. When did you turn that into coaching? When did your passion for all of this turn into where you were going to spin it over to where you were going to help other people make massive changes in their life?
Yeah. So 2015 is when I founded the business and started doing this formally.
Okay.
Formally. So I give one caveat behind this, because why I say formally is because that was the time I hired my first coach. And it was the time that I realized that, and it was 6 months after my son was born, where I realized I wasn't the man, husband, and father that I always said I was going to be. And I didn't have the people in my life, nor the intellect or the skill set to figure it out myself. So I went out and hired a coach. Now, I'm going to say this a little bit flippantly, but there is truth to this. I interviewed 14 coaches.
Wow.
The first 13 were an inch deep and a mile wide. They had no relevance and credibility. And I was literally about ready to just say, well, screw it. I'm not going to keep looking for a coach. But then I found somebody that I landed with, and he's a guy by the name of Ben Newman. He's well-known in the space. He coaches some of the highest performers. And this was, 7-10 years ago. So it was at a time too, where he was growing in the beginning parts of his career. Anyway, long story short, he told me the first call I had with him, he said, Brian, you got to be doing this. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, You build people and you build businesses, and you do it naturally. He's like, you are always looking for if and how you can help. And he said, and you just give like really solid, credible feedback. He's like, why aren't you doing this? And I was like, yeah, whatever, dude. F off. I'm paying you a lot of money not to tell me how great I am, but to help me figure out this other stuff. And now you're trying to add something else into my world. Like, I'm trying to reduce and get more intentional, not add.
Yeah.
And he ended up just trickling it every single month for about 9 months. And this was through the end of 2014, the beginning part of 2015. And then the universe just sent me a sign that said it was time. So I jumped in with both feet, and I was just absolutely humbled by the response. But I will tell you that 4 to 5 years of doing that alongside my other business, because I hadn't executed my buy sell. I hadn't left that other business. I hadn't said I'm going to go do this full time. I hadn't committed to go impacting 1 billion lives. I hadn't like gotten super, super clear in every single one of the ways that we were going to teach. And so for 4 to 5 years, we coached and we had great impact. But the depth at which we go today has really been in existence for 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
And so when we really get into the depth of human experience, like outside of discipline and mental toughness and different pieces, this purely emotional side as well, to really understand how we're connecting with ourselves most deeply, it's been a journey over the last 2 to 3. And I will tell you that the empathy and compassion that's been paired with that work has been heightened through the roof. Our impact has been through the roof. And the transformation that we are now seeing in people's lives, which we always had a good track record for, is truly like incredible at this point. And I don't say any of that to impress, my friend, because I want to be really clear. The work that we do with people is some of the hardest work anybody will ever do. But it's also some of the most meaningful and pays the greatest dividends in that investment in themselves. But it's just remarkable to see where someone can go from being completely stagnant and stuck to completely open and free, to believing that certain things are impossible, to realizing that they're not only possible, but they're right within their reach. And so, that's one of the things that I would tell you is that I love coaching because my wins are not my wins. They're other people's wins. Yeah. It's even more fun for me to see someone else break through a consistent pattern that they've been slamming their head against the wall on for 30 years. And all of a sudden the light goes off and they start to move through it. Man, that's freedom. And so that's what drives me at this point is I know what it's like to be miserable, stuck, unworthy, defeated, depressed, anxious, stressed, absolutely like scarce, perfectionists, control, like all these things that were tapped to my own shame and my own anger. But I also now know what it's like after having gone through so much of this over a decade. And yes, you're right. I'm not totally arrived. I never will be. It's going to be a constant evolution, but I'm finally in a place where I am who I am. And I'm living so freely that I want everybody to experience this.
Wow. You breezed right by it talking about impacting 1 billion lives, but let's go to that. I actually don't know why, but I think that it's awesome that you're only 2 or 3 years into really diving truly fully into the business or the impact that you guys are doing. I'm not sure the right words, but you were invested in it from 2015 when you decided to treat it like a business, but only like really jumping in full bore the last couple of years. I love that. I think the reason I love it, Brian, just person to person, just straight up to you, is because that doesn't show. It doesn't show. And I think that says a lot about who you are and also about how you operate, because it was interesting. You were talking about how you went through several different coaches, and that's really interesting because we're in a society today for people that pay attention to personal development, that maybe read the books, that watch the YouTube videos, that go to the seminars, right? Go to the trainings. You spend 2 or 3 days in the raw experience, and you go back to feeling alone. Been there, done that, right? And so that's really a normal thing. The truth is, it's especially after COVID. Like I think that when people started looking at how do I reinvent myself, I'll be a life coach, and then I can do everything from home. So you've got all these people that now become these gurus or these health coaches or these life coaches or these transformation coaches, and the list goes on, a fit coach, all these things. I mean, there are so many of them, and it's so easy for somebody that's naive and not test the waters like you did to just fall right into that. And so it's interesting that you did interview or test the waters or kind of find where you fell into that, and then you finally found one, and thank God that you did, because it sounds like it was what needed to happen.
Yep.
But again, you certainly don't come off new to the space, and I think that just goes along with Well, with alignment, frankly, with purpose. I think it's a purpose for you. So you have a desire to make an impact, or to bring value to a billion people. And I don't, if I understand correctly, and I want you to talk more on this, but I think this is not just you. I believe this is you and your wife together. Is this a family goal? And if I'm not saying that correctly, correct me on that. But where does this stem from? And say it right for me. It's not just that you want to bring value to a billion. Is it that you want to impact a billion lives? What's the heart?
We want to impact a billion lives by reducing the level of suffering in those lives.
Okay.
And so, there's multiple different ways that we go about this. I would tell you that this came as my crazy, hairy, audacious goal that my wife and our team have now adopted as a mission that we're all on. Wow. And so that's like really, really beautiful that it came out, and it was, with everything I do, it has intention to it. So the billion wasn't just because it sounded good. It was, I looked at it and I was like, okay, there's 7.2 billion people on this planet. There's roughly around 2.4 to 2.5 who have access to modern technology. And if we look at the United States alone, there's about 330 million people. Okay. Which also goes to show that, okay, this is not a small feat that we're setting out on.
Yeah.
One. And two, the largest movements that have ever been created in our society have all capped out around 100 million people. So BLM was the last one that reached that. They got right around 100 million people, and then the movement kind of stopped. Now, that doesn't mean that the impact and what they're doing has stopped, but the movement of actually bringing more and more people onto the journey capped out around 100 million people. So again, I'm highlighting the fact that what we're seeking out to do is not only crazy, but it is intentional and aware. But I looked at that and I said, okay, if we have 7.2 billion people, 2.4 with access to modern technology, then 1 billion people is going to be roughly 15 to 18% of the entire population. I don't know if I did my math correctly off the top of my head, but of the 2.4, we're impacting roughly 40%. And so in modern technology, that's what it is. So we're doing it across multiple different entities. And there is actually a formal movement that's attached to it as well. We own iam1billion.com, and we have a thought process with a set of people that are leaders in their respective fields across multiple different industries, because it has to be multifaceted and it's going to be multi-continent as well. It has to be.
Yes.
And so the only way we do this is to really create a movement that brings people together and stop separating us through the polarization and politicization that exists in our world that develops so much suffering. But I believe that so much suffering exists in 4 ways. The things that are left unsaid, the things we lack permission to feel or say, the things we lack the words to articulate, or the things that are left undone. And so much of what we're doing is getting somebody to eliminate suffering in their life in one of those 4 ways. Have a conversation that they needed to have address a problem and conflict within themselves or within their relationships that they need to do, change areas in their business or world or what have you, because we truly have the ability to reduce suffering real time in our lives by the choices and the actions that we take. And so that's where we come from with it, is that 1 billion lives, and again, moved people move people. So it's not Brian Bogert impacting 1 billion lives. This will be done through collective impact. It's going to be done by going on shows with people like you who have a common belief, common system, and allowing our words to permeate through your platform, impact the lives in your audience and the ripple effect that goes through them. What I recognize that this is a ripple effect. This is not, we're going to directly impact 1 to 1 to 1 to 1. Yes. We're going to impact 1 to many and many to many, and that will multiply over time.
Absolutely. Well said and so true. And so I just want to encourage the listeners to get behind that same thing. If it speaks to you, get behind that movement. If it speaks to you, don't get behind something that it doesn't speak to you. But if it speaks to you, get behind that. Go check out the website, see how you can get involved. Go check out Brian's page, go to his Instagram. All this information will be in the details, obviously, as is every week. But like, get behind the things that you're passionate about. And if this is one of those, the only way we can make massive change and massive impact on this earth while we're here is to do something, is to get behind it. And I think it's awesome. I think that, again, my whole heart is to bring value to people. And I think that is very similar to what you're saying. And obviously you have, you probably have some core values of what it is that you want to bring, or some core statements, some core things. But I think it's so important. I think it's so easy there's a lot of hurt people, and there's a lot of people that aren't doing anything about it because they don't know how, or they don't have the ambition to change it. And so if more people around the world, I love that it's global for you. I love that. And it's going to take that, like you said,
it has to be. It has to be.
For the
and
numbers
I'll be clear,
to
the
work.
iam1billion.com is not available and live yet. So that movement will be something to watch. Cool. But even what you just said, I wanted to pause for a second, because When I say move people, you said there's a lot of hurt people. Mm-hmm. Hurt people.
Yeah.
And so we are just trying to help people feel in the way that they can get rid of the pains that are actually preventing them from not hurting, so that they no longer hurt other people. Because if we can get them to move into action through healing and through connection, then guess what? That ripples through their world also.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I wanted to ask you, so in your coaching and your teaching programs, is any of this counseling? Is there a comparison, or would you consider any of this counseling?
So I understand why it could get associated with counseling, but we are not bringing in like deep psychological reference on things. And I would tell you that what we are doing is to bring these places to a level of awareness to ignite and incite healing and movement forward. But what I would tell you is that most counseling and therapy, and I want to be really, really cautious when I say this, because I'm sure there's going to be therapists, counselors listening to this. There are many really phenomenal individuals in that field that are having profound impact in people's lives. So I in no way want to take away from that. But I find that there's a lot of people who come to us and they've done a deep amount of counseling and therapy in their lives. And they're very aware of all of the ways that they have these feelings and emotions in them. But what they've not been empowered with is what to do about it, how to move through it. Mm-hmm. And so what's happened as a result is many people come through counseling, through therapy, and they are just more aware of all the ways they should be judging themselves versus actually understanding how to heal. Because now that I know that my father looked at me bad when I was 4 and it created these patterns in my life, that doesn't mean I know how to escape them real time. Because emotional triggers are those things that literally transport us to a place that's no longer connected to this moment. It's when you're loading the dishwasher incorrectly and your spouse looks at you and you just all of a sudden get a reaction, and it has nothing to do with the dishwasher. It has nothing to do with how your spouse looked at you and everything to do with how your grandma told you to load the dishwasher when you were 7. But the reality of it is until we take that control and influence in those moments, we cannot move through them. And so that's where I would tell you is we're less focused on why, though that is an important part of what we unroot. We're more focused on what, and then recognizing how does this actually connect to who I'm becoming as well. So whether it's my business, my relationships, my health, or the primary areas that I know I need to heal through, improve, or have a desire to be greater than I am today, we actually use these emotions and patterns from the past to be fuel for our futures versus keeping us stuck in the present.
Well said. I think that's awesome. And I asked that for that reason, because I could see it maybe getting a little misconstrued, or maybe perhaps, I don't want to ever speak on behalf of the listener, but, even for me as somebody who actually has never been to counseling, I do have my first counseling appointment scheduled for June.
Cool.
Yeah, it's very foreign to me, very scary to me. But I know I need to work through some things. And so, but I also want to, in case somebody is curious, like, well, is this there? It's a good question to ask, because
it is a great question to ask.
Yeah, I know that coaching is different, but also it sounds to me like you do get into some psychology, a little bit of. So you get into some depth. It sounds like, and because I know
we do get into depth, but we try to help people move through those periods. And again, I've gone to counseling, I've gone to therapy.
Yeah.
So in no way am I vilifying it, but there's a time and a place for both.
Sure.
And so that's where I always try to distinguish the difference between them, because coaching also applies patterns more holistically in life than just in the particular traumas that we've experienced. And so that's one of the ways that we just, again, nothing wrong with counseling and therapy. I'm so happy you're going. I've gone. I will go again, I'm sure. And so it is another vehicle for healing, and a very effective vehicle for healing.
Yeah.
We just find that in the ways that we work with people, we see movement happen either faster or larger.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, we're going to wrap things up. I appreciate your time so much. I got a couple of questions for you. One is if somebody is listening or watching and they're like, hey, I want to know more, we could literally send them to so many different places. I know you have a few different websites. I know they can go to your socials, but just to one place to keep it simple, where would you want to send somebody if they just want to know a little bit more about what you're doing with coaching?
Go to nolimitsprelude.com. And what it is, it's actually the first part of a free coaching course. So there's over 30 minutes of video content. It's actually on the Lightspeed platform with Brad Lee. It'll be over 30 minutes of video content on the first chapter of our course. So it allows you to begin with the end in mind. nolimitsprelude.com.
Okay. And I cut you off. You said it's the first 30 minutes of what?
It's the first 30 minutes of video content of our course, as well as the first chapter of our 8-chapter course on Lightspeed. So the big disclosure that I give everybody, because this is just how I operate. Do you exchange your email to get access to the course? Yes, you do. Do you get communications through the course of completing those 30 to 40 minutes of course content? Yes, you do. Will you get 4 emails afterwards to give you other opportunities to engage with our team? Yes, you will. So this is not an attempt to spam you. This is an attempt to elevate and empower you. And if the free course is all you need to get started on your journey, then that's all I want you to take. But if there's other ways we can help you beyond that, we're absolutely happy to. But again, this is not just to get you into some funnel so that we can spam you for perpetuity. This is truly an offer to try to help.
I love that. You're a good dude, man. I love that. What are you reading right now?
I just got done reading The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer, and I deeply, deeply enjoyed it. And he has another book. He wrote The Untethered Soul as well. And he has another one that just came out that I am about to start that is called Living Untethered. And so Untethered Soul came first. The Surrender Experiment came second. Living Untethered is his kind of third book in that series. And I have Trust, Surrender, Breathe tattooed on my arm. Surrender is a big part of my journey in the last 18 to 24 months in particular. And so it's resonating very deeply with me in alignment with a lot of my consciousness work.
Very cool. I will check those out and include those as well. And for people to check into as well. Okay. So last question, my son who's 15 and he's my world. He's amazing. He said about a month ago, he said, Dad, I want you to do me a favor. Start when you interview your friends. I want you to start asking this question. So in honor of him, I'm going to start asking this question. I have been asking and it's fun. Who is the most, I don't like the word famous, but who's the coolest person's phone number in your phone contacts? And tell me one very quick story about them.
Oh, geez. So I am not a name dropper. So I'm going to talk about the person, but I'm not going to tell you who it is.
Okay. That's fair.
But I'm going to go as far to say they are one of the coolest individuals that I've been around. They are an individual who has won Mr. Olympia multiple times. They have been somebody who's put themselves in a position to be on that stage and judged from the vanity perspective while still maintaining growth internally. And they have multiple different businesses at this moment that are focused around creating impact and changing that game in the bodybuilding world to have it be much more healthy in the way that people are tapping into the natural side versus some of the unhealthy, toxic elements that exist in the space. I've gotten to know him. Really, I haven't known him that long, maybe 3 months, but I have really, really enjoyed the conversation, the relationship building that's been taking place. And I'm sure I'm going to be doing some joint work with him before too long.
Awesome. That's cool. So that's the coolest right now. He's the coolest.
I think he's the coolest. I wouldn't say he's maybe the most famous or the most wealthy, but he's pretty damn cool. And I really have enjoyed getting to know him.
Yeah. Hey, wealthy doesn't make you cool. There's some wealthy people that aren't that cool. Let's be honest.
Yeah. No, I think he's just a really, really cool individual. And I've enjoyed my time with him so far.
Very cool. Hey, I appreciate you so much, man. Your time has been incredible today. Thanks for taking the time out. Thanks for making it work in your schedule. I know you stay busy. And I really appreciate you. I appreciate your authenticity. I appreciate your love for others. I appreciate your heart. I appreciate that you love people. I love people so much, and I wish and I hope and I pray that more people will love more people, because I think it's so important. And I just hope every day that people will see their value. And I think to make it, to help other people see their value, I think it takes people that love others. And that's the only way we can do it, is by sharing that and being willing to be open and vulnerable and honest and authentic, because the more people that are willing to, it's interesting. You talked about surrender. If we can surrender and be willing to just be us, it'll help other people soften a little bit maybe, and be willing to go, hey, I'm real too, Yeah. So thanks for being an example of that.
Maybe in another day, we'll have to talk about our knife and string analogy, because that ties very much into what you just said. So we'll save that for another day, but maybe we do another quick interview on that at some point. That'd be fun to jam on.
Yeah. That'd be awesome.
But Chaz, I want to say thank you. Thank you for being who you are. Thank you for building a platform for me to be able to come in and pour good into the world. And thank you for the model that you set by living your truth every single day. In the little time I've interacted with you, I can tell the purity that comes through you, the authenticity that comes through you. And so you are giving a gift to each one of your listeners every time you get on the airwaves. And I just want to honor that for you, because you're having impact, and you're having impact probably in ways greater than you even imagine.
Well, I appreciate that. I receive it, and I thank you so much for that, man. And again, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, brother.